an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering the Obelisk Gate. Chapters 4, 5, and 6. You are challenged, Essun takes the reins, and you commit to the cause. In these chapters, we see a little bit more of what happened with Essun's husband when he runs away with her other child, who is an orogeny. And we get a little bit more information about what makes the orogenes what they are, and what it is that Alabaster expects of her. Spoiler alert, it's a lot. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. Many thanks to Jason for commissioning this episode. I'm sorry, my throat is like, this is the third recording today. My voice has mostly come back. But every now and then it starts to the wires get crossed. Many thanks to Jason for commissioning this episode, and hopefully I'll be able to make it through this one completely. Yesterday, I was 3/4 of the way through a recording, and I just had to end it because my voice just straight up stopped coming out of my mouth. But yeah, Jason, I think commissioned the first chapters of this as well, and I know that Denise has commissioned 2 episodes, I think, following this one, which is really good because it's been so long since I covered the first chapters of this book that I had to go over and refresh my memory a little bit because I couldn't remember the details of some of what happened. So this section, Chapter 4, You Are Challenged. This is such a weird moment because it's the you, but it's also Syenite. This is when things start to collide. You're tired after calling the Obelisk. When you get back to your room and stretch out for half a moment on the bare pallet that came with the apartment, you fall asleep so fast you don't even realize you're doing it. So later on, right now, Hoa is here, but later on, Hoa kind of disappears, and we don't know where he went, and I'm not going to lie, that concerns me a little bit. I am constantly on edge with the stone people around. You know what I'm going to do, guys? I am going to give you all my honest feeling as I'm reading this right now, which is that at the moment with this story, I'm kind of overwhelmed. There is a lot of wild information coming at us, a lot of different perspectives coming at us, moving around in time so that I'm not sure when things have happened and when they haven't. And there are things that I feel like I'm supposed to be picking up on, what that is referring to, that I think would work a lot better if I were reading this in one shot. But because of the way that I'm doing Spoil Me episodes, and they're so spaced out, it really muddles whatever it is that the author is trying to do. Because in the interim, I lose track of maybe some foreshadowing that was dropped here and there. So there are going to be moments when I'm relating to you what I read in this section where I'm going to straight up be asking you, what does this mean? Because I am not positive. And I just want you all I want to be honest with you guys about that I'm not it's not that this book isn't engaging. It's that it's written in a certain style that I feel is not really enhanced by covering it in the method that I am. And that's not the book's fault. It's not anybody's fault. It's just kind of how it works out. And if there are people who are listening to this who are going to be able to come to the net. Like if you're ever unsure when the next episode of something is going to be, check out Unspoiled Podcast, or no, check out facebook.com/unspoiledpod, and the events are on there, and you can check and see when the next one is, and maybe come and hang out in the chat and direct me if you feel like you know some information that I don't know, because I guarantee you that there are going to be things that I'm asking, like, well, wait, who is that? Or what does this mean? And you guys are going to be so irritated because I'm going to have like read this, but it's going to have been so far back that I might not remember. So I'm just, letting you all know where you can find that information if you want to be able to correct me in real time, instead of like tweeting at me in the middle of the recording when you're listening to it and it's past time for me to be able to change anything. So coming back into the present, Syenite is waking up famished, trying to find something to eat. The food that is in the little apartment that she's in is all stuff that needs to be cooked that can't necessarily just be eaten as it is. But she has some stuff that's like still in her sack from when she was traveling, and she eats that and makes do. And she thinks to herself at one point, nothing about this calm makes sense. It will probably take you weeks, if not months, to get used to its peculiar sounds. And then, parenthetically, months. Are you giving up on Essun so easily? So, yeah, that's interesting. She's sort of accepting that she's going to be staying here for a little while. And I don't feel like that's a bad idea. It's the sort of thing where I'm like, I don't even think that I would be averse to her staying here, even if we didn't have Essun's POVs. Having Essun's POVs certainly helps, because it assures us that, well, I was going to say it assures us that she's safe, but those are in the past. Like, those POVs that we're getting are from right after everything went wrong. So, as of right now, I'm actually not sure that she's safe. But I do think that this is one of those things that I'm always sort of like, have this disconnect. Whenever there's books where there's a mission where you have to like find somebody and it's a person that we haven't met, I'm always a little bit less invested because I don't know who it is. And all I know is that it matters to you, which should be enough, but isn't necessarily. So right now, her urgency in finding Essun has really diminished, and as a reader, I'm kind of glad, because I don't really care about Essun right now. I am much more interested in finding out what the fuck is going on here, and her learning to, be able to control her power. So she's sitting here thinking about how there's this weird noise, and then she realizes that it's screaming. And she gets up, and here comes one of the worst things. I am reading, right before this, I recorded for Sabriel. And Sabriel has some creatures in it that are really inventive and really alarming and upsetting. But I feel like they are alarming in general, like appearance and the fact that they're sort of supernatural. And these are alarming because of what they can straight up do. So Syenite comes running out, and there's all kinds of other people also running out because they hear a human being screaming at the top of their lungs in horrible pain. So everybody's interested in what the fuck is going on. And she hears somebody shout for Lerna, who is the medic. And she runs in there, and this turns into a sort of a weird scene later on. And I'm going to get into, because, earlier I was saying, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed. There are things that I'm not going to understand. This scene that this leads to later is one of them, and I'm going to ask you all about this. But right now, she is staring down at them dragging this dude in who is covered in like a tarp or something, who's screaming, and there's like this weird appearance to his body underneath the tarp. And she looks up, and Hoa is looking down and has this expression of like pity on his face. And more than the guy screaming, Hoa's expression of pity really gets her moving. Like, she's sort of like, what the fuck why does he have that look on his face? She flies down there, and there is this little moment. To your surprise, people glance at you in annoyance, then blink and shift aside. You notice those who look blank being pulled aside for quick whispers by those whose eyes have widened. Oh ho, Kastreema's been talking about you. Interesting. Then you're inside the infirmary, and you nearly get knocked down by a Sanzid woman running past with some sort of syringe in her hands. So she injects this dude who is screaming in pain, and he is sedated finally and able to, they can do whatever it is that they're going to need to do. I'm going to read this. At first, you can't tell what the problem is, other than that his pants seem oddly wet in patches, caked with muddy ash. The wetness isn't red, it's not blood, but there's a smell that you're not sure how to describe. Meat and brine. Hot fat. His boots are off, baring feet which still spasmodically twitch a little, the splayed toes relaxing only reluctantly even in unconsciousness. Lerna is cutting open one pants leg with a pair of scissors. What you notice first, as he peels away the damp cloth, are the small, round, blue hemispheres that dot the man's skin here and there, each perhaps 2 inches in diameter and an inch of rounded height, shiny and foreign to his flesh. There are 10 or 15 of them. Each sits at the center of a patch of bloated pink-brown flesh, covering perhaps a handspan of the man's legs. You think the lumps are jewels at first. That's kind of what they look like, metallic over the blue, and beautiful. So, this turns out to be a bug. They're called boil bugs. They are bugs that store water inside, highly pressurized. It boils, and they can cook the flesh of the creature that they attack with that boiling water. And when you try and pull them off, they release jets of boiling water to defend themselves. It is horrifying. Like, this is the worst thing I've ever heard. I don't know how many of you have experienced burns, but burns are probably like top 3 worst injuries that I can think of. It's so incredibly, like, there's this primal sort of reaction, and I can't even imagine what it's like to have these embedded in your skin. It's essentially like having a bunch of brands jammed into your flesh that they'd never pull back. So this guy is describing what happened, and he says, "We were out by the salt quarry, thinking it might be a good place for hunting. There was some kind of sinkhole near a steam runnel. Beled," and that's the guy's name, not this one, but a different guy. He says, "Beled, I don't know. He's gone. I heard them both scream at first, but I didn't know why. I was upstream looking at some animal tracks. By the time I got there, it was just Tertius there, looking like he was trying to climb out of the ash. I helped him out, but they were on him already, and more were crawling up his shoes, so I had to cut them off." And they are, like, not everybody here is familiar with what these things are, but some people are. Someone grabs for one of the jewel objects and tries to pull it off, then jerks their hand away, yelping as Lerna did. The object changes, 2 pieces of the shiny blue surface flaking away and lifting before clapping back into place, and suddenly it shifts in your head. It's not a jewel, it's a bug, some kind of beetle, and the iridescent shell is its carapace. In the moment that it lifted its wing covers, you saw that its round body was translucent, with something jumping and bubbling inside. You can sense the heat of it even from where you are, hot as a boil. The The man's flesh steams around it. Someone gives Lerna the forceps, and he tries to pull off one of the beetles. Its wing covers lift again, and a thin jet of something skeets across Lerna's fingers. He yelps and drops the forceps, jerking back. "Acid," someone says. Someone else grabs his hand and tries to quickly wipe off the stuff, but you know what it is even before Lerna gasps. No, just water. Scalding water. So, yeah, this is the worst thing I've ever heard. Alabaster, meanwhile, has figured out that he can do something about this and is watching this man and figuring out how to target one of these bugs and freeze it off. And he does this and gives you the idea that you can do this. And slowly you start to focus and try. It's something that you would never have tried on your own and wouldn't have thought you could do until you saw Alabaster do it. So he starts to teach you, basically, without speaking. And I'm going to read this. The hot points of the insects cess like geothermal vents as you step forward and focus your sesapine. Lots of controlled pressure in their tiny bodies. That's how they make the water boil. You lift a hand toward the man out of habit so everyone will know you're doing something, and you hear a curse, a hiss, a scramble of feet and jostling bodies as people move back from you, away from any Taurus you might manifest. Fools. Don't they know you only need a Taurus when you have to pull from the ambient? The bugs have plenty of what you need. The difficulty will lie in confining your draw just to them, and not the man's overheated flesh underneath. Ika's Stone Eater takes a slow step closer. You sense her movement rather than seeing it. It's like a mountain shifting toward you. Then Ruby Hair stops as suddenly there is another mountain in its way. Hoa, stock still and quietly cold. Where did he come from? You cannot spare another thought for these creatures right now. So when I talk about being a little bit overwhelmed, it's things like this that I find a little overwhelming. This scene is already high tension, but then Ruby Hair coming at her and Hoa having to sort of defend her, I feel like is another piece of the puzzle, and I don't understand the significance. I just don't know what that's supposed to mean. And I feel like I'm missing something obvious, but I don't know if it's obvious. I'm just like, I'm really unsure of how much I'm supposed to know, like, because the author has told me, and how much the author is hoping I'm picking up, or just how much the author is foreshadowing, but assumes I'm probably not picking up. Like, it's hard for me to tell what's meant to be obvious and what isn't. So you manage to pull off all of them. And finally, you have all of this like energy still in you. And Ika grabs your arm. There is an inversion, a channeling away as you would do to an obelisk, except there is no obelisk. And you aren't doing the channeling even though it's your orogeny. All at once you hear people exclaim outside, and you glance through the infirmary's door. The infirmary is a built building, not carved from one of the giant crystals of the geode. Inside, it's lit only by electric lamps. Outside, however, through the uncurtained doorway, you can see the geode crystals glowing noticeably brighter all over the calm. You stare at Ika. She nods back at you in a matter-of-fact, collegial way, as if you should have any clue what she's just done, or as if you should be comfortable with a feral doing something that a ringed fulcrum orogeny can't. So, I am assuming, and this is, again, me not, like, being sure that I'm supposed to get this or what, that Syenite is, like, humming with this like power from having taken these things off. I don't understand the physics of like exactly what energy is remaining, because the only clue you get, you're breathing hard because that degree of fine focus is much, much harder than shifting a hillside. need anything shaken? She blinks, assessing instantly what you mean. So that's extra energy, right? And then she grabs your arm and somehow manages to redirect that energy through herself into the crystal that you're all standing in. I guess. Right? And that's something that we can't understand as readers, and Syenite can't understand. I hope I'm getting this right. It's just so... It's talked around in such a way that it feels really opaque to me at times. Because it's described in how it feels to Syenite rather than the actual, like, the matter-of-fact explanation of what it is she just did. And I can understand that Syenite doesn't know how she did it, but it seems like she knows what she did. And I really just want her to explain what it, like, I think I get it, but I'm not positive. I don't understand, too. Ruby Hair is like watching from the sidelines and kind of smiling and showing her teeth. And it feels like there's some significance to that as well. But I don't know what that is either. So this whole interaction, it feels like there's all this subtext and there's all of this like implication that I don't understand. And I'm not sure if I'm supposed to understand it or if it's meant to be a bit of a mystery until later. But I'm trying to be as straightforward with you guys as I can be right now. So we have her going over to Alabaster and realizing that his shoulder, all the way up to his shoulder now, up to his elbow, my bad, has turned into stone. And this is the first time that she's really put it together that when he uses orogeny, it's turning him into this. So basically what that means is he cannot do orogeny anymore without killing himself. And that's a pretty big fucking deal. Like, I don't know how this happened. If he used so much power when he did this like enormous break earlier, that did he use up all his power? Is that possible? But something clearly has changed. And she looks over at Antimony, who's the stone woman that's been around him. And Antimony is staring at Alabaster's friggin' arm because that's going to be her dinner later. And I am horrified, you guys. I do not understand how this can be what's happening. Alabaster is a 10-ringer who can suddenly not do orogeny anymore. And not only that, he is getting eaten by this stone woman every time he does it because he's turning himself basically into food for her when he does. How? What kind, like, is this something that just happens to orogenes? Like, would this happen to somebody else? Has he made a deal with Antimony? Is this something that she has done to him? Is this him accessing some other kind of ability inside himself that, like, is beyond even what most orogenes can do? And that's sort of, like, later on, for example, he asks her to sort of look inside him, and she can sense something else between, like, his blood cells, basically, which she asks him what they call it. And he says they call it magic, which is not a word that she has heard before. And I'm wondering if this is somehow feeding on magic now, and, like, the ability of the orogene that's remaining in his blood is being used up. But I don't know if that's how that can work. And if it is, I just don't understand why he doesn't just explain it to Syenite. Just tell her what's going on. But anyway, okay, so we're getting to the scene that I find really confusing. Lerna comes out and he's smoking a cigarette. And Lerna's the doctor, right? Basically. And Syenite asks, "You all right?" And he says, "I'm going to kill him when I go back in there." Then you understand. The bugs burned through skin, muscle, maybe even down to bone. With a team of humanescene doctors and cutting-edge biometric drugs, maybe the man could be kept alive long enough to heal, and even then he might never walk again. With just whatever equipment and medicines Kastrima has to hand, the best Lerna can do is amputate. The man might survive it, but this is a season, and every calm dweller must earn their shelter from the ash and cold. Few calms have use for a legless hunter, and this calm is already supporting one burned invalid. So Lerna is very much not all right. You decide to change the subject slightly. "I've never seen anything like those bugs." The locals say they're called boil bugs, though no one knew why before now. They breed around streams, carry water inside themselves. Animals eat them during droughts. Usually they're carrion eaters, harmless. Things change during a season, though. Yes, cooked carrion probably lasts longer. "You could have gotten those things off him the instant you walked in the door," Lerna adds. You blink. Then it registers in your mind that this statement was an attack. It's so mildly delivered from such an unexpected quarter that you're too surprised to be angry. "I couldn't," you say. "At least, I didn't know I could. Alabaster, I don't expect anything from him. He came to die here, not live here." Lerna pivots to face you, and all of a sudden you realize that his placid manner has been concealing absolute rage. His gaze is cool, but it's visible in everything else. His white lips, the flecks of muscle in his jaw, his flaring nostrils. "Why are you here, Essun?" You flinch. You know why. I came to find Essun. Essun's out of your reach. Your goals have changed. Now you're here to survive, same as the rest of us. Now you're one of us. His lip curls in something that might be contempt. "I'm saying this because if I don't make you understand, you might have a rusting fit and kill us all." You open your mouth to reply. He takes a step toward you, though, and it's so aggressive that you actually sit up. "Tell me you won't, Essun. Tell me I won't have to leave this calm in the dead of the night, hoping nobody you've pissed off catches me and slits my throat. Tell me I'm not going to have to go back out there to fight for my life and watch people I try to help die again and again and again until I get eaten by rusting bugs." He cuts himself off with a choked sound, turning away sharply. You stare at his tense back and say nothing, because there's nothing you can say. This is the second time he's mentioned your murder of Terimo. And is that surprising? He was born there, grew up there. Lerna's mother was still living there when you left. You think. Maybe you killed her too that last day. There's nothing you can say, not with guilt souring your mouth, but you try anyway. "I'm sorry." Prove you're sorry. How? Word's spreading. A couple of the biggest gossips in the calm were with Ika when she met you, and apparently you confirmed what a lot of the Ragas have been whispering among themselves. You almost flinch at his use of the word Raga. He was such a polite boy once. Topside, you said the season won't end for thousands of years. Was that an exaggeration or the truth? So, okay, backing up to where I'm confused. I don't understand, first of all, why he's accusing her basically, like right out of the gate. He acts like she just didn't help this guy because she didn't want to when she could have. Which we know as readers is not true. She did not know she could. She tells him that. But he doesn't seem to like hear that. And then he's like, well, why are you here? And he says, why are you here? In this really accusatory way. And I'm not sure what he's so angry with her about at this point. He says he's basically worried about this place ending up like Terimo, which is the town that she destroyed, that she used to live in. But like, Terimo was where she had tried to make another life for herself, and her husband killed her child and then ran off with the other child. So for him to act like her kind of losing her cool is so unacceptable. Like, I get that she killed a ton of people, but she tried really hard to get out of there without completely ruining everything, and she got stopped on her way out. So, I don't know. I'm just kind of like, I don't really understand the way that he's like blaming her for this. And I don't understand why he's using this moment as the opening for this argument with her, you know? I just don't, I don't really understand the motivation behind this conversation happening right now. And I guess he's basically accusing her of like just passing through, and that she needs to come to terms with the fact that she can't just be passing through, that Essun is so far outside of her reach that she's obviously not just going to like drop everything and leave this calm right now and go on. First of all, What's-Her-Face said that she couldn't. Like, basically, it's been implied that they're prisoners. So we know that she can't anyway. But I don't get why he acts like she's supposed to be acting differently than she is. Like, she's, I thought, cooperating as best she can. She tries to help when she realizes that she can do something about these bugs. She does. She is going and doing like her work shifts that she has been assigned later on without complaint. You know, she's not like, she even thinks to herself that it'll be months before she can like get used to this, and realizes that that means that she's kind of giving up on Essun, but like that she maybe has to do that. And he seems to be accusing her of treating this place like, I don't know what, just like a stopover or something. And I don't know why he's any more angry at her than he is at any of the other orogenes, because he says the other Ragas, there's others here, and they could be just as dangerous as she is. Granted, we have later a conversation which points to the fact that she's a lot stronger than average, but nevertheless, I feel like there's a particular like subtext here that I'm not getting, and I don't understand why she is so willing to take it. That's the other part. He accuses her or yells at her, and there's a feeling to her of sort of like accepting the licks, you know, like sort of just being like, yeah, that's, you know, it's not totally fair, but it's partially fair, so I'm going to accept this blame. And I don't see it. I don't get how it's partially fair. So that's the other thing, is that I'm just sort of confused about like, what the fuck is it, like, does she believe that she deserves to be treated like this by him? Like, I don't really understand this. He straight up asks her if Alabaster made the rift, and she doesn't want to say, because she assumes that if anybody else finds out, they're all going to fucking descend on Alabaster and kill him. But Lerna is like, listen, it's really not hard to figure out. He has wounds from like steam and corrosive gas. His wounds aren't normal, and everything that's happened to him is clearly from something like a crack in the ground. He asks, what are the obelisks for? And she's just like, I don't know. I really don't. And he says, I think you have an idea, but sure, go ahead and lie to me. Whatever. They're very antagonistic here. You aren't leaving because you aren't stupid. Maybe you can survive out there, but not as anything Essun would ever want to see again. And if nothing else, you want to live so that you can eventually find her again, however unlikely that is. And then he starts to talk about the season not ending and how everybody is just going to starve to death. And he is talking about how Essun could maybe survive longer than Jija, her father, because she has orogeny. She can intimidate people. She can use that to threaten people and get them to give up their food to her. But nevertheless, it's still going to end badly for her. Like, there's only so far that she can push it before all food has run out. And I don't know. I just don't really understand the point of this conversation. She has to know this already, right? Like, it's occurred to me when she said that the season isn't going to end for thousands of years. My immediate response was like, well, what's the point of anything then? Because we're all going to die then. And it's going to end here. There's not going to be an ability to create more food. But she's treating this like it's all brand new. Like, this hasn't occurred to her. I don't know if it's that because we have been having these interspersed chapters of like interludes where we get a bit of history of origins and seasons and whatnot, that it's a little fresher in my mind than it is for her. But all I have been thinking about is the fact that they're all going to starve to death. Like, that's been uppermost in my mind. So this conversation where he like painstakingly points out exactly how it's going to go down felt really unnecessary, because like, obviously we all know this. And he's like, and you know, we can be cannibals for a little while, but even that only goes so far. And I'm like, yeah, I know. Like, yeah, why are you talking about this? He's just trying to like fucking galvanize her to what? I don't even know. He says, the rumors spreading, everyone's thinking about how slowly their children will die, thinking about how they can't do anything about it. But you can, he doesn't need to say. Can you? What? Where did that come from? Do what? Like, this is where I'm super lost. To me, the assumption that we're all going to slowly starve to death, of course, that's the way the seasons work. Everything is dead, right? Thousands of years, there's no recovering from that. That's it. But then he says, but you can. And the obelisks, I don't understand what the fuck she has learned about how these obelisks work that even put it in her head that those can be connected to doing something about what's happening down here. That's the main part of it, is that he's saying, but you can, in subtext. And I don't know where he got that from. I don't know where she's getting that from. I feel like I must have missed something pretty significant, because I cannot put together where the obelisks like have anything to do with being able to survive a season. I just don't get it. And even later on, when she's talking about this with what's-her-face, I still don't get it. Is it supposed to be that they're, like, edible? Like, what is that? Are stone people, like, an evolution? I really don't, guys. I'm sorry. I feel so at sea. And I kept reading thinking that, like, it's being hinted at and it's going to become clear. But the more I read, the more it felt like everybody already understood something that I am not getting. So I need your help, basically. Come on and help me out and tell me what the hell. So she goes and tries to talk to Ika. And Ika is like irritated because if Syenite had not killed all the bugs, Ika could just have done a mercy killing on this guy and put him out of his misery from being attacked by these bugs. But because she was able to kill the bugs first, now it's like killing him because he won't be useful anymore. And that's a really different fucking situation. You know, that gives a very different impression. It's just a lot more cold-blooded and not rooted in compassion. And so Syenite's like, yeah, I put you in an awkward situation. I'm sorry. So she tries to sort of make peace by giving her a cigarette, and they smoke together and just sort of wait it out until somebody outside or somebody inside begins to cry because they know finally that this guy has been put down. Then we have a little blurb after. It is unfathomable that any sensible civilization would be so wasteful as fill prime storage caverns with corpses. No wonder these people died out, whoever they were. I estimate another year before we can clear all of the bones, funeral urns, and other debris, then perhaps another 6 months to fully map and renovate. Less if you can get me those black jackets I requested. I don't care if they cost the earth. Some of these chambers are unstable. There are tablets in here, though, something in verses, though we can't read this bizarre language. Like stone lore. 5 tablets, not 3. What do you want to do with them? I say we give the lot to Forth so they'll stop whining about how much history we're destroying. Report of journeywoman Fogrid Innovator Eumenes to the Genere Licensure? Equatorial East. Proposal to repurpose subsurface catacombs, City of Fear Away. Master level review only. Okay, don't know what that is. So, we have an interlude talking about the killing of vermin and comparing them to sort of, let's see, where is it? Whereas you and all your kind have cracked the surface of the planet and lost the moon. If the mice in your garden, back in Remo, had helped Jija kill Uche, you would have shaken the place to pebbles and set fire to the ruins before you left. You destroyed Remo anyway, but if it had been personal, you'd have done worse. Yet for all your hatred, you still might not have managed to kill the vermin. The survivors would be greatly changed, made harder, stronger, more splotch-backed. Perhaps the hardships you inflicted would have fissioned their descendants into many factions, each with different interests. For a long time, I was one of the vengeful ones, but what it keeps coming back to is this. Life cannot exist without the earth. Yet there is not an insubstantial chance that life will win its war and destroy the earth. We've come close a few times. That can't happen. We cannot be permitted to win. So this is a confession, my Essun. I've betrayed you already, and I will do it again. You haven't even chosen a side yet, and I already fend off those who would recruit you to their cause. Already, I plot your death. It's necessary. But I can at least try my damnedest to give your life a meaning that will last till the world ends. So, what the fuck does that mean? I've betrayed you already, and I will do it again. Is that Syenite talking basically about her, like, other personality, Essun? And that Essun is, like, gonna be sidelined? I feel like you haven't chosen a side yet, and already I fend off those who would recruit you to their cause and plot your death. But I can at least try my damnedest to give your life a meaning that will last till the world ends. So then we go to Essun takes the reins. This is really heartbreaking. Essun is riding with her dad in the carriage, and this is right after he killed Uche. And she is trying to explain to him that Mom made me lie. And she's talking, but he's ignoring her. But she finally touches him. And all of a sudden is like sailing over the side of this like ravine. It's not a ravine because she would have died. It's a little bit less intense than that. But this is a really interesting because she's thinking about how mean Mama was to her, and that her daddy loves her and was always, like, basically spoiled her, and that the way he's acting right now must be Mama's fault. And this is one of those things that, like, I feel like if you are a parent in a mixed race relationship and you have children who are, and you are the person of color in that relationship, and you have children who look like they are of color, who are not white passing, your white partner may not understand what you have been up against your whole life. And this is something that has really come to the fore in the past 5 years for a lot of people in their relationships, is realizing that they are with somebody who is racist but doesn't realize it, or who is racist and they have been aware of their partner's racism but have given them a pass for whatever reason, and are now coming up against a wall where they cannot ignore it anymore. And you, as a parent of color, are like, feel that you have a responsibility and an obligation to inform your child of what they can expect from the world as a person of color. But you know that in telling them these things, it's going to scare them, and it is going to make you sound like you're paranoid. And your partner may not support you explaining these things to your child, because they will not understand that whether you explain it or not, they will experience it. So you may as well prepare them. But your partner wants to protect them because they think that this stuff doesn't happen as often as you say. It's not as bad as you think it's going to be. Yada, yada, yada. And that's what I thought of here, is that Essun is being taught how to manage her orogeny by her mother in a very strict and what Essun interprets as loveless way. We know that Essun was doing this out of love. She wanted her children to be safe, and so she taught them meticulously because she cared about what happened to them. But Essun does not have that perspective. So all she sees is a mother who is too strict and mean and distant and scared. She doesn't see that part. We know that's what it is. Scared. And a father who has always been kind and sweet to her, and so she likes her father better. And this is really one of those things that, like, breaks my heart, because people who have to deal with this kind of thing with their kids, I don't know how you do it. I really don't. Bless you. And I just, I just can't fathom having to prepare your children and knowing that what you're doing out of love for them is going to distance them from you. And maybe one day they'll understand what you were trying to do and they will appreciate it, maybe. But that's not a guarantee. And you just have to hope that at the very least they'll be safe and you'll be willing to sacrifice your relationship with them for their safety. And that is a lot. That is a big sacrifice to make. And it's fucked up that we have to put people in the position to choose like that. So, she's talking to her dad, grabs at his hand, says, "I wanted to tell you." The world blurs. She hits the ground harder than she should because she's not quite mastered the skill of not reacting, and she stiffens up physically along with not reacting orogenically. And the world blurs because she has not only been knocked off the driver's seat of the wagon, but she has actually rolled off the edge of the Imperial Road and down a gravel-strewn slope toward a small creek-fed pond. The creek that feeds it is where, in a few days, Essun will bathe a strange white boy who acts as if he has forgotten what soap is for. So her father comes down and is crying, sobbing, crying. I'm sorry, sweetening. I don't want to hurt you. You're all I have left. I'm so sorry. You can't have this one too. And she doesn't understand at this time exactly what's going on. All she knows is that he's saying he still loves her. So she senses a surge of energy, and she doesn't react to it quite fast enough. She could have stilled it if she had tried, but she is so trained to not react that she freezes up at first, and then when she does start to react, all she can do is sort of protect them from what's happening around them. The concussion passes. The pond slaps back into place, spraying them with muddy snow. There are screams, human and inhuman. Cracking wood, crumbling stone, the distant screech of something man-made and metallic rending apart. Then there is silence. Her father's arms ease around her, and she wiggles until he lets her go so that she can get to her feet. Then Daddy turns to look at her slowly, and she sees in his face what Uche must have seen in those last moments. "Did you do this?" he asks. The orogeny has cleared Nessun's head of necessity. It is a survival mechanism. Intense stimulation of the sesapine is usually accompanied by a surge of adrenaline and other physical changes that prepare the body for flight, or sustained orogeny if that is needed. In this case, it brings an increased clarity of thought, which is how Essun finally realizes that her father was not hysterical over her fall purely for her sake, and that what she sees in his eyes right now is something entirely different from love. Her heart breaks in this moment, another small, quiet tragedy amid so many others. "I didn't stop all of it, Daddy. I tried." The daddy is what works, just as her tears saved her before. It's instinct that she steps forward and takes his hand. It is a manipulation. Something of her is warped out of true by this moment, and from now on, all her acts of affection toward her father will be calculated, performative. Her childhood dies for all intents and purposes, but that is better than all of her dying, she knows. Yikes. Yikes, y'all. Yeah, that's a lot. Jija. He is Jija now, hereafter, forever, and never daddy again, except out loud when Essun needs reins to steer him. That is brutal. So they come across some people who have been injured, and he's talking about taking them to a hospital, and she has to remind him, like, those hospitals are not there anymore. And he finally, like, puts one of these guys out of his misery, snaps his neck. And then we get into chapter 6. And this is Tanki, and she is talking with Syenite about moons, but does not know what they are. Because Alabaster had told her to talk to a geomist about it. And, this is the only geomist that she knows, I think. And, yeah, Tanki has no idea what she's referring to. And then she starts to share this kind of, like, theory that she has. She talks about the invisible tethers anchoring to amethyst and topaz and onyx obelisks. Syenite says chains, and Tanki is like, no. If there was a chain, it would be following you because you're making it follow you. Force, not gravity. But a satellite reacts to you regardless of whether you try to make it react. It's drawn to your presence and the weight you exert upon the universe. It lingers around you because it can't help itself. Not to ascribe motivations and intentions to the obelisk, of course, that would be silly. Which I'm like, would it? Because we don't know what these are. So, Syenite brings up the sockets. And she says, the dimensions of every obelisk recorded have been slightly different, so only some, or maybe even just one, would have fit in that socket. Or maybe the socket changed every time they put one in there, adapting itself to the obelisk. How do you know they put them in there? Maybe they first grew there, then were faceted or mined and taken away later. So that's something that she hasn't thought of, and she sort of sits back and thinks about it. And she says that she went into this vault. She kind of broke in. She wasn't necessarily supposed to go in there, that her family owns. And found all sorts of stuff, maps and weird objects and whatnot. There was one tiny, perfectly round yellow stone about an inch in circumference. Someone had put it in a glass case, sealed and plastered with warnings not to touch. Apparently the thing had a reputation for punching holes in people. So either there's some truth to the family stories, or amazingly, being rich and powerful makes it easy to assemble quite the collection of valuable ancient objects. Or both. So you snuck into the fulcrum to try and find the socket, because somehow this proves some rusty old story your family passed down. There's truth to other parts of the stories, too, Tonki says. I mean, a lot of the stories are rust and mellow smoke. I don't want to pretend otherwise. But I learned at 7th that the obelisks go as far back as history goes and then some. We have evidence of seasons from 10, 15, even 20,000 years ago. And the obelisks are older. It's possible that they even predate the shattering. Which is pretty wild. That they've been around this whole time. I didn't really think about that. But I don't know what, So her theory here, she is talking about how things change during a season. And she says everything that grows or walks on land, they have to, we are precisely the way we need to be because that's how the world works. Some animals grow lung filters during a season, or start breathing water and move into the ocean where it's safer, or bury themselves and hibernate or whatever. We've figured out how to build not just coats, but store caches and walls and stone lore. But these are afterthoughts. Like when a cartwheel blows a spoke and you're halfway between comms, you improvise. You put a stick or a bar of metal into the space where the broken spoke was to keep the wheel strong enough to last until you can reach the wheelwright. That's what's happening when a Kirkusa suddenly develops a taste for meat during a season. Why don't they just eat meat all the time? Why haven't they always eaten meat? Because they were originally built for something else. They're still better at eating something else, and eating meat during seasons is the slapdash last-minute fix nature threw in to keep Kirkusa from going extinct. That's why I can't stop thinking about the obelisks. People built them, which means that as a species we're at least as old as they are. That's a lot of time to break things, start over, and break them again. Or, if the leadership stories are true, maybe it's enough time to put a fix in place, something to tide us over till the real repairs can be made. Wait, they think the obelisks are the fix? Basically, the stories say the obelisks held the world together when it would have come apart, and they imply there might someday be a way to end the seasons involving the obelisks. And when Syenite says, well, that would be amazing, Tonki's like, you might also be a fix as an orogeny, and without seasons, orogenes might not be needed anymore. And I'm not really sure what that means, but I don't like the sound of that. So this is when Syenite goes to visit Alabaster, and he's just doing real bad, and he's being sung to by his stone eater who has just eaten his arm, evidently, because it's shortened some. And he tells Syenite that he thinks he's underestimated her development because she was able to call the onyx when he was talking about the topaz, which is much closer. And he tells her that he thinks that she might be a 9 ringer, which even though the fulcrum isn't even a thing anymore because it's all gone, it's still kind of like a compliment. And she's sort of, gratified to hear that. And he tells her to look inside his body. And she has to really focus to be able to do this. And it's so unnatural to her. There's something in this stuff that you're becoming, this stone stuff. It's rock and it's not. Can you assess flesh further down the arm? You shouldn't be able to, but when you narrow your focus to the limit that you can, when you squint and press your tongue to the roof of your mouth and wrinkle your nose, it's there too. Big sticky globules all bouncing against one another. You withdraw at once, revolted. At least stone is clean. So she pulls out and he's like, no. Stop being a little coward. You need to go back in there and sense what's happening. And she is able to focus between these globules and senses the same thing that she sensed in the stone parts of him. Something that's not flesh or stone. And energy, shiny and streaming, potential, intention. What is it? The stuff of orogeny. And she's like, okay, because orogeny really just doesn't make any sense that we're able to do what we can do. And he says, the civilization that made the obelisks had a word for this. I think there's a reason we don't. It's because no one for countless generations has wanted orogenes to understand what we do. They just wanted us to do it. And he said, when she says, I can see why nobody would have wanted us to learn how to manipulate obelisks after Alia, he says, rust the obelisks. They didn't want us to create something better or worse. The stuff you see in me is what you have to learn to control and perceive wherever it exists. It's what the obelisks are made of, and it's how they do what they do. We have to get you to do those things too, and make you a 10-ringer at least. And then he says that the moon used to be in this world, and that the loss is part of what caused the seasons. And at this point, this dude comes by and has to feed him, and there's a whole thing. And she asks him, why don't we just say you should, he says, why don't we just say you should come back later? But she interrupts, why did you do this to yourself? And he says that it's the consequence for what I did at Eumenes. Sometimes the price is worth paying. And she asks, why wouldn't you just live? And I'm going to wrap this with this phrase. That's when you no longer need an answer to the question, there is such a thing as too much loss. Too much has been taken from you both. Taken and taken and taken. Until there's nothing left but hope. And you've given that up because it hurts too much. Until you would rather die or kill or avoid attachments altogether than lose one more thing. And this is just like heartbreaking, seriously. I know I use that word a lot when talking about this book, but that's what it is. He wraps by telling her that the word that they had for the stuff in between is called magic. And that is the end of the chapter. So, again, thank you very much to Jason for commissioning this episode. Really appreciate it. I hope that you guys all enjoyed listening. And I will be seeing you again soon with a new episode. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.